You know nothing about this company." Marcus Hastings' words dripped with contempt as he stared down at the black woman in the cleaning uniform. But when she pulled out a single document from her cart, the color drained from the billionaire's face, because what she knew would destroy everything he'd built on lies, and she had waited 23 years for this exact moment. Welcome to Stories by Jason. If you're settled in and ready for a good story, hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I've got another exciting story coming your way tomorrow, and trust me, you don't want to miss it. Thank you so much for the love and support. You're truly appreciated, and I'm so grateful to have you here with me. The fluorescent lights of Hastings Technologies hummed their monotonous song as Evelyn Morrison pushed her cleaning cart down the marble corridor of the 42nd floor. Her reflection ghosted across the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Seattle's glittering skyline, a bent figure in a gray uniform, rendered nearly invisible by the city's indifference and the late hour. It was 10:47 p.m., and she was right on schedule. She had cleaned these halls every weeknight for 6 months now, each step deliberate, each room memorized. The executive floor smelled of expensive leather, fresh coffee, and the particular musk of power, a scent she'd once known intimately from the other side, back when she'd walked these kinds of corridors in tailored suits and confidence. That was before Marcus Hastings. Evelyn paused outside the corner office, the one with Marcus Hastings, CEO and founder, emblazoned in chrome letters across the frosted glass. Through the transparent sections, she could see him, a tall man in his early 50s with silver-threaded dark hair, sharp features, and the kind of casual arrogance that came from never having been told no. He was on a video call, feet propped on his desk, a desk made from reclaimed walnut that cost more than most people's cars. She knocked softly, the sound barely audible. "What?" His voice snapped through the door, irritation immediate. Evelyn opened the door a crack. "Excuse me, Mr. Hastings, I'm here to clean your office. Should I come back later?" He didn't even look at her. "Do I look like I care about your schedule? Wait outside. I'll let you know when I'm done." She nodded, retreating, feeling the familiar burn of invisibility. To Marcus Hastings, she was furniture that occasionally moved. In 6 months, he'd never once looked her in the eye, never learned her name, never saw past the uniform to the human being beneath. That was precisely what she'd been counting on. 20 minutes later, he emerged from his office, shrugging into a custom-tailored coat worth several $1,000s. He brushed past her without acknowledgement, already on his phone, his voice echoing down the corridor. "I don't care what the engineers say, Trevor. We launch next quarter. If the product's not ready, make it look ready. Perception is reality." Evelyn entered his office and began her work, or rather, the appearance of it. She dusted, she emptied trash, she straightened already straight chairs. But her real work had been happening for months, in the precious hours between when executives left and before security made their rounds. Tonight she allowed herself a moment to stand behind his desk, looking at the wall of accolades. There were magazine covers, the tech visionary who changed everything, framed patents, photos with presidents and celebrities. And there in the corner, almost lost among the self-celebration, was a small plaque. Hastings Quantum Processing System, patent filed 2002. Her hands trembled as she stared at it. The technology that had made Marcus Hastings a billionaire. The innovation that had launched an empire. The invention her husband had died for. "What are you still doing here?" Evelyn spun. Marcus Hastings stood in the doorway, having returned for some forgotten item. His eyes, ice blue and sharp, finally focused on her, perhaps for the first time ever. I'm cleaning, Mr. Hastings. I'm almost finished." He strode into the room, and she noticed the slight unsteadiness in his gait, smelled the whiskey on his breath. He'd been drinking. This wasn't part of the plan, but she'd learned long ago that life rarely followed plans. "You're the night cleaning lady." It wasn't a question, but a statement of categorization, filing her away in his mental hierarchy. "Yes, sir." He picked up a tablet from his desk, then paused, seeming to really see her for the first time. His gaze was appraising, dismissive. "You know what's funny? I have people working for me who went to Harvard, Stanford, MIT, brilliant minds. And then I have people like you, who probably never finished high school, pushing mops." Evelyn said nothing, her jaw tight. "That's the natural order of things," he continued, warming to his theme, the alcohol loosening his tongue. Some people are meant to build empires, others are meant to clean up after them. No shame in it, we need people like you. Society needs someone to take out the trash. I understand, Mr. Hastings. Do you? He laughed, leaning against his desk. Do you even know what we do here? What kind of technology we're creating? I doubt you could understand it if I explained it. Something in Evelyn's chest, something that had been compressed and buried for 23 years, finally cracked. She planned to wait another 2 weeks, to gather just a bit more evidence to make absolutely certain. But standing here, listening to this man's casual cruelty, she felt the weight of silence become unbearable. I know exactly what you do here, Mr. Hastings, she said quietly, her voice different now, steady, educated, dangerous. He blinked, surprised by the change in her tone. You create quantum processing systems that revolutionize data encryption, she continued. Your flagship product, the Hastings QPS-7, uses a dual-phase quantum bit stabilization method that allows for unprecedented computational speeds. Your company holds 47 patents in quantum technology, though the foundational patent, the one that made all the others possible, was filed in 2002. Marcus Hastings straightened, his expression shifting from surprise to suspicion. You know nothing about this company, he said, but his voice had lost its certainty. Evelyn set down her cleaning spray. Her hands were steady now. Actually, Mr. Hastings, I know everything about this company. I know its real origin story, the one that isn't in the press releases or the authorized biography. I know about April 17, 2002. I know about the cabin in Redmond. I know about the patent filing that happened 48 hours after that night. The color began to drain from his face. Who are you? He whispered. My name, she said, pulling herself up to her full height, shedding the invisible woman persona like a discarded coat, is Dr. Evelyn Morrison. And 23 years ago, you stole my husband's life's work, filed it under your own name, and left him to die when he confronted you. Marcus Hastings' tablet slipped from his fingers and clattered against the hardwood floor. That's impossible, he breathed. Evelyn Morrison is dead, she smiled without warmth. That's what you assumed, wasn't it? When I disappeared after James's funeral, when I couldn't afford lawyers to fight you, when I lost everything, my home, my career, my reputation. You assumed I just faded away, another casualty erased by your ambition. I don't know what you think you know, Marcus said, his voice hardening as he recovered from the initial shock, but you're delusional. James Morrison was a colleague who had some interesting ideas that unfortunately went nowhere. I built this company from the ground up with my own innovations. Is that what you tell yourself? Evelyn asked. Does it help you sleep at night? Get out, Marcus said coldly. You're fired, and if you repeat these insane accusations to anyone, I'll bury you in lawsuits until... Until what? Until I lose everything again, Evelyn laughed, and it was a sound without joy. Mr. Hastings, you can't take from someone who has nothing left to lose, but I can take everything from you. You have nothing, he sneered. No proof, no credibility. You're a cleaning lady making desperate accusations against one of the most respected names in technology. No one will believe you. Evelyn reached into her cleaning cart, past the bottles and rags, and pulled out a slim folder. June 1998, she said, opening it. You and James meet at a quantum computing symposium in Boston. You're a mid-level developer at Microsoft, ambitious but unremarkable. James is already being called the next great innovator in quantum processing. You become friends, or so James believed. She pulled out a photograph, yellowed with age, showing two young men with their arms around each other's shoulders, smiling at the camera. One was unmistakably a younger Marcus Hastings. The other was a handsome black man with kind eyes and an infectious smile. Marcus stared at the photo, his jaw working. Over the next 3 years, James shares his research with you, his friend, Evelyn continued. He's generous that way. He believed in collaboration, in lifting others up. He invites you to his lab, shows you his prototypes, includes you in his thought processes. And you absorb it all, memorize it all, waiting. This proves nothing, Marcus said, but his voice was thin. April 2002, Evelyn said. James makes the breakthrough, the dual-phase stabilization method that makes practical quantum computing possible. He invites you to celebrate at our cabin in Redmond. You know he's planning to file for the patent the following week, but you have other plans." She pulled out another document, a police report dated April 18, 2002. James Morrison found dead at the bottom of the cabin stairs. Ruled an accident, he'd been drinking, lost his footing. Investigation closed within 3 days. She looked up, her eyes burning into Marcus. "You were the only other person there that night." "An accident," Marcus said. "A tragic accident. I gave a statement to the police." "And 48 hours later, you filed a patent for the exact technology James had shown you. The exact methodology, the exact specifications. You changed just enough terminology to make it seem original, but the substance, the revolutionary breakthrough, was all James's work." "You can't prove that." "Can't I?" Evelyn's smile was razor-sharp. "For 6 months, Mr. Hastings, I've been in this building every night, and you know what's remarkable about being invisible? People forget you're there. They have conversations in hallways. They leave documents on desks. They forget to log out of computers." She watched the realization dawn on his face with savage satisfaction. "I've recorded over 40 hours of conversations, including several where you privately joke about borrowing the quantum breakthrough from a dead researcher who wasn't going to use it anyway. I have emails you thought were deleted, retrieved from backup servers. I have testimony from 3 former employees who witnessed you bullying engineers into silence when they noticed the similarities between your early patents and James's published research." Marcus's face had gone from pale to grayish. "You're bluffing." "Am I? Would you like to call my bluff?" Evelyn pulled out her phone. "Because I have a very interesting contact list now. The Seattle Times technology reporter who's been investigating tech industry fraud, the FBI agent who specializes in intellectual property theft, and particularly interesting, Sarah Morrison Chen, my daughter, who happens to be a patents attorney at one of the most aggressive firms in the country. She doesn't know I'm alive yet. I wanted to gather all my evidence first. But I think she'd be very interested in pursuing her father's case, don't you?" "What do you want?" Marcus asked, his voice hoarse. "Money. I can pay you to make this go away. Name your price." "You think this is about money?" Evelyn's voice rose, emotion finally breaking through. "You think you can write a check to fix what you did? You killed my husband, Marcus. You stole his legacy. You destroyed my family. My daughter grew up without her father because of your greed." "I didn't kill anyone," Marcus shouted. "James was drunk, he fell." "Did he, or did you push him when he refused to let you take credit for his work, when he realized what you were planning?" "You can't prove murder. It was ruled an accident." "Perhaps," Evelyn said softly, "but I don't need to prove murder to destroy you, Marcus. I just need to prove theft, intellectual property fraud, patent violation, and I can prove all of that beyond any doubt." Marcus slumped against his desk, the fight draining from him. "What do you want?" he asked again, defeated. Evelyn looked around the office, at the empire built on her husband's genius, at the accolades stolen from a dead man's legacy. "I want," she said clearly, "justice, real justice, public justice. I want the world to know the truth about Marcus Hastings. I want your company to acknowledge James Morrison as the true inventor of the technology that made all of this possible, and I want you to face consequences for what you did." "If you expose this, you'll destroy the company," Marcus said desperately. "Thousands of jobs." "The company will survive. Companies always survive, but your reign ends now." Marcus straightened, his eyes calculating once more. "All right, let's say you have evidence. Let's say you go public with these accusations. It will be a legal battle that lasts years. You'll spend whatever life you have left in depositions and courtrooms. Are you prepared for that?" Evelyn smiled. "I've been preparing for 23 years. Every day without James, every night I spent in homeless shelters, every moment of being invisible and dismissed, it all led to this. I'm more prepared than you can possibly imagine." "This conversation is over," Marcus said, reaching for his phone. "I'm calling security." "Go ahead," Evelyn said calmly. "And I'll call the reporters I have on speed dial. We can all have a conversation together. I'm sure they'd love to hear about the accusations being made against the great Marcus Hastings by the widow of the man whose work he stole." Marcus's hand froze over his phone. "Here's what's going to happen," Evelyn said, her voice taking on a steel edge. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., there's a board meeting. I know this because I've cleaned the conference room and seen the agenda. You're presenting the quarterly earnings and the roadmap for next year's products. How do you? I told you, I'm invisible. People talk around me like I'm furniture. She stepped closer. I will be at that board meeting, Marcus. Not as a cleaning lady, but as Dr. Evelyn Morrison. And I will present my evidence to your board of directors, your investors, and the media representatives I'm inviting. You can either cooperate and make this less painful for everyone, or you can fight me and watch me burn your world down in the most public way possible. You're insane. Perhaps, Evelyn said. Grief and injustice can do that to a person. But I'm also right, and I have proof, and I have nothing left to lose. That makes me the most dangerous person in your life right now. She gathered her folder, returned it to her cart, and moved toward the door. Then she paused, looking back at the man who had haunted her nightmares for more than 2 decades. You said earlier that some people are meant to build empires and others are meant to clean up after them, Evelyn said. You were wrong. Some people build empires on lies and stolen dreams. And then people like me, people you made invisible, we clean up the mess. We restore the truth. See you in the morning, Mr. Hastings. She walked out, leaving Marcus Hastings standing alone in his office, surrounded by the monuments to his stolen success, finally understanding that the woman he'd never bothered to see had become his reckoning. Evelyn Morrison didn't sleep that night. She sat in her small studio apartment in Beacon Hill, a far cry from the 4-bedroom house in Laurelhurst she'd lost decades ago, and watched the pre-dawn light creep across the Seattle skyline. Her hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had long since gone cold, and her mind traveled back to a time when her life had been full of light and possibility. Spring 1997. The University of Washington campus bloomed with cherry blossoms, and Dr. Evelyn Chen, as she was then, walked across the quad with a stack of research papers threatening to topple from her arms. She was 32, an associate professor of quantum physics, and she just published a groundbreaking paper on quantum entanglement that had the physics community buzzing. Dr. Chen weighed up. She turned to see James Morrison jogging toward her, his own armload of papers even more precarious than hers. James was 35, a visiting researcher from MIT, and arguably the most brilliant quantum computing theorist she'd ever encountered. He was also devastatingly kind, with a laugh that made everyone around him smile and a genuine curiosity about everyone he met. Please tell me you're going to the symposium dinner tonight, he said, slightly out of breath. I'm supposed to give a talk on quantum bit stability, and I need at least one friendly face in the audience to keep me from panicking. You panic, Evelyn laughed. You presented to the National Science Foundation last month without breaking a sweat. That was science. This is socializing, much scarier. They fell into step together, and Evelyn felt something she hadn't felt since her divorce 3 years earlier. Genuine connection. Not the surface-level colleague relationships that dominated academia, but something deeper, something real. 6 months later, they were married in a small ceremony at the Arboretum, with their daughter Sarah, Evelyn's 5-year-old from her previous marriage, dropping flower petals and declaring James, the best bonus daddy ever. Evelyn touched the photograph on her dresser, James, herself, and little Sarah, all laughing as they flew a kite at Golden Gardens. It was one of the last photos taken before everything fell apart. 1990-82001. They were golden years, despite the academic pressures and the long hours in the lab. James and Evelyn became a formidable research partnership, their different approaches to quantum problems complementing each other perfectly. He was the theoretical visionary. She was the practical experimentalist who could translate theory into working prototypes. Their home laboratory in the basement became a hub of innovation. Sarah would do her homework upstairs while her parents wrestled with quantum mysteries below, occasionally running down to watch her father explain complex concepts using toy blocks and string. You're going to change the world, love, Evelyn told James one late night in the lab, after he'd successfully demonstrated a quantum bit that remained stable for a full 30 seconds, an eternity in quantum computing terms. We're going to change it, James corrected, pulling her close. This is our work, our dream. That was also when Marcus Hastings entered their lives. James met him at a quantum computing symposium in Boston. Marcus was a developer at Microsoft, smart but unremarkable, working on server infrastructure but fascinated by the emerging field of quantum computing. He and James struck up a conversation at the conference bar, and Marcus was charming, self-deprecating about his own work while effusive in his praise of James's research. "This guy Marcus really gets it," James told Evelyn after returning from Boston. "Most people in industry just see quantum computing as a buzzword, but he understands the real potential. I think we could collaborate with him, maybe bridge the academic-industry gap." Evelyn had met Marcus twice and found him slick. There was something performed about his enthusiasm, something calculating behind his praise. But James saw the best in everyone, and Evelyn trusted her husband's judgment. Over the next 3 years, Marcus became a fixture in their lives. He visited their lab, asked detailed questions about their research, and positioned himself as the bridge between James's academic work and commercial applications. James, generous to a fault, shared everything: his notes, his methodologies, his half-formed theories. "You should patent some of this before you publish," Evelyn warned more than once. "Marcus works for a major corporation. You're handing him proprietary information." "Marcus is a friend," James said. "Besides, science should be shared. The whole point is to advance human knowledge, not to hoard discoveries." "James, I love your idealism, but this is naive. In the commercial world, people will absolutely steal your work and claim it as their own." "Not Marcus," James said firmly. "I trust him." Even now, decades later, Evelyn felt the hot rush of guilt. She should have pushed harder. She should have made James see the danger. But she deferred to her husband's kindness, and it had cost him everything. April 2002. James made the breakthrough that would change everything. It was a Thursday evening. Evelyn was at a conference in San Francisco, presenting her own research. She called home to say goodnight to Sarah, and James answered with barely suppressed excitement vibrating in his voice. "Evie, I did it. I actually did it." "Did what?" "The dual-phase stabilization method. I solved it. Quantum bits can remain stable for minutes now. Minutes. Do you understand what this means? This is the key to practical quantum computing. This makes everything we've dreamed about possible." Evelyn's heart soared and plummeted simultaneously. "James, that's incredible. But listen to me, don't tell anyone yet. Not until you file the patent. Not until the intellectual property is protected." I know. I'm filing next Monday. My attorney already has the preliminary paperwork." "Good, and James, don't tell Marcus, not yet." There was a pause. "Actually, I already called him. He's driving up to the cabin this weekend to celebrate. I wanted to share the moment with someone who'd understand what it means, and you're in California." Evelyn's blood ran cold. "James, no, call him back, cancel." "It's fine, honey, he's my friend." "James, please, something feels wrong about this. Wait until after you file the patent, please." "Evelyn," James said gently, "I love you, but you're being paranoid. Marcus has been nothing but supportive for years. I'm not going to insult him by suddenly acting like I don't trust him." They'd argued, their first real fight in months. Finally, Evelyn had conceded, making him promise to at least not share the detailed methodology until after the patent was filed. "I promise," James said. "Now get some sleep, and kiss Sarah for me when you get home." Those were the last words she ever heard him speak. Evelyn pressed her palms against her eyes, but she couldn't stop the memories from flooding back. She'd gotten the call at 3:47 a.m. on April 18, 2002. A police detective with a soft voice delivering impossible words: accident, deceased, cabin, alone. The flight back to Seattle was a blur of denial and disbelief. This couldn't be happening. James was careful. James was healthy. James was supposed to pick Sarah up from school the next day. At the police station, she'd met Detective Raymond Ortiz, a tired-looking man in his 50s, who guided her through the details with practiced sympathy. "Your husband fell down the stairs at the cabin around midnight. Broken neck. Death was instantaneous. A witness, Marcus Hastings, a friend who was visiting, called 911, but there was nothing that could be done." "Marcus was there." Evelyn's voice sounded distant to her own ears. "Yes, ma'am. They were having drinks to celebrate some kind of work achievement. According to Mr. Hastings' statement, your husband had several glasses of whiskey. Mr. Hastings went to bed around 11:30 p.m. He was awakened by a loud crash and found your husband at the bottom of the stairs. James barely drank. A glass of wine with dinner maybe, but whiskey, that doesn't sound like him. Grief can make us question everything, Mrs. Morrison, the detective said kindly. But sometimes terrible accidents are just accidents. We found empty whiskey glasses, elevated blood alcohol content. The stairs at that cabin are steep and poorly lit. It was ruled accidental death. I'm so sorry for your loss. Evelyn had wanted to scream that something was wrong, that Marcus couldn't be trusted, that this was too convenient. But she was drowning in shock, and grief was already pulling her under. She went through the funeral in a daze, with 10-year-old Sarah clinging to her hand and asking when Daddy was coming home. Marcus had attended the funeral, appropriately somber, offering condolences and support. "If there's anything you need, anything at all," he'd said, gripping her hand with what seemed like genuine sorrow. 3 days after the funeral, while Evelyn was still trying to figure out how to explain death to her daughter, Marcus Hastings filed a patent for a revolutionary quantum computing stabilization method. Evelyn discovered it by accident, when a colleague called to offer congratulations on James's patent finally going through. "What patent?" Evelyn asked. "The quantum bit stabilization method. It just showed up in the patent database. Listed inventor is Marcus Hastings. I assumed it was joint work with James that Marcus is pushing through to honor him." Evelyn pulled up the patent filing with shaking hands. Every detail, every specification, every element of James's breakthrough, filed under Marcus Hastings' name alone. No co-inventor credit. No acknowledgement of James's work. She'd called Marcus immediately, fury overriding grief. "How dare you?" she'd hissed into the phone. "That's James's work. That's his life's achievement, and you stole it." Marcus's voice had been cold, all pretense of sympathy gone. "Evelyn, I understand you're grieving, but you're confused. This is my research. James and I talked about quantum computing, yes, but this specific methodology is entirely my own work." "That's a lie. James told me about the breakthrough the day before he died. He was going to file the patent on Monday." "Do you have proof of that? Documentation, witness testimony?" "You know I don't. James was careful about keeping his research confidential until filing." "Then you have nothing. And frankly, making wild accusations about a friend who tried to save your husband's life is disgusting. I suggest you focus on your daughter and your grief and stop making baseless claims." He'd hung up. Evelyn rose from her chair and walked to the window. Dawn was breaking over Seattle, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. She'd spent the subsequent years trying to fight Marcus Hastings and failing at every turn. She'd hired a lawyer, but her funds were limited. James's life insurance had been minimal, and his death left them with unexpected debts. The lawyer explained that without documentation proving James's work, without witnesses, without evidence, a patent case would be nearly impossible to win. "It becomes he said, she said," the lawyer explained. "Except one person is dead and the other is a well-connected tech professional with Microsoft on his resume. No judge will overturn a patent on a widow's testimony alone." Evelyn had gone to the media, but the story never gained traction. Marcus Hastings was becoming a rising star in tech, and her accusations seemed like the desperate claims of a grieving widow unable to accept her loss. One reporter actually asked if she was having some kind of breakdown. Her academic colleagues, while sympathetic, distanced themselves. No one wanted to be associated with accusations that sounded increasingly unhinged. Her research funding dried up. She lost her university position. The house went into foreclosure. And through it all, Marcus Hastings rose. He left Microsoft and founded Hastings Technologies with venture capital funding, using the stolen quantum technology as his flagship product. Within 5 years, he was a multimillionaire. Within 10, a billionaire. His face appeared on magazine covers. He gave TED Talks about innovation and disruption. Evelyn, meanwhile, descended. She and Sarah moved into smaller and smaller apartments. The legal battles depleted what little savings they had. Depression and grief made it hard to function, let alone rebuild a career. Sarah, trying to understand why their life had imploded, began acting out. Social services got involved. The final blow came when she lost custody of Sarah. Not permanently. She wasn't deemed unfit, just unstable. Her ex-husband, Sarah's biological father, petitioned for primary custody, arguing that Evelyn was too depressed and financially unstable to care for their daughter. The judge agreed. "You can have her back when you're stable," her ex-husband said, not unkindly. "Get help, Evelyn. Sarah needs a functioning parent." Evelyn lost her apartment shortly after. She spent 2 years in homeless shelters and transitional housing, working minimum-wage jobs, lost in a fog of grief and rage and helplessness. She saw Sarah once a month for supervised visits, watching her daughter grow up at a distance, knowing that Sarah blamed her for abandoning her father's memory by giving up the fight. It took 5 years to claw her way back to basic stability. She got treatment for depression. She worked as a home health aide, then as a hospital cleaner, slowly rebuilding financial stability. She completed the substance abuse and mental health programs that social services required, proving she was stable. By the time she'd rebuilt enough to pursue custody again, Sarah was 18 and had chosen to stay with her biological father. They spoke occasionally, awkward phone calls where neither knew quite what to say. Sarah had become a driven, ambitious young woman studying law perhaps, Evelyn thought, trying to find justice through a system that had failed her parents. Evelyn could have given up then. Many people would have. But something in her, some core of steel forged in the fire of loss, refused to let Marcus Hastings' victory be permanent. If she couldn't beat him with lawyers and media, she would beat him with patience and proximity. She researched everything about Hastings Technologies. She learned that the company contracted their night cleaning to a service called Metro Clean Solutions. She applied for a job there, deliberately aiming for the bottom rung, the late-night shifts that no one wanted, the positions where turnover was high and scrutiny was low. She was hired immediately, and then she requested, specifically, to be assigned to the Hastings Technologies executive floor. "Most people don't want that assignment," her supervisor said. "Long commute downtown, demanding environment." "I don't mind," Evelyn said. "I prefer to work where I won't be disturbed." For 6 months she'd been a ghost in Marcus Hastings' world. She listened, she observed, she documented, and she discovered that Marcus Hastings' empire, for all its success, was built on a foundation of cutting corners, bullying employees, and ethical violations that never quite crossed into outright illegality, but came close. She'd found allies, too. A senior engineer named Derek Patel who'd grown disgusted with how Hastings took credit for his team's innovations. An HR coordinator named Lisa Chen who kept documentation of multiple harassment complaints that were buried. A former CFO who'd resigned rather than participate in questionable accounting practices and was willing to talk if the right situation arose. She'd befriended the security guard who worked her shift, a retired cop named Marcus who'd inadvertently shared that security footage was backed up to a server that most people didn't know existed. Piece by piece, witness by witness, document by document, she'd built a case. Not just about the original patent theft, though she had evidence for that now, including emails retrieved from ancient backup servers, but about a pattern of behavior that revealed Marcus Hastings' true character. And now finally she had enough. The sun had fully risen. Evelyn checked her watch, 6:30 a.m. In 2.5 hours the board meeting would begin. She showered and then opened her closet. She'd kept one good suit from her academic days, preserved in a garment bag through all the moves and hardships. She put it on now, a charcoal gray suit that still fit, though it hung a bit loose after years of irregular meals. She styled her hair, applied minimal makeup, and looked at herself in the mirror. The woman looking back at her wasn't the invisible cleaning lady. She was Dr. Evelyn Morrison, quantum physicist, widow, and the ghost that was about to end Marcus Hastings' reign. She picked up her phone and made 3 calls. First to Sarah's number, a call that went to voicemail as it usually did. "Sarah, it's Mom. I know we haven't talked much lately and you have every right to be angry with me, but I need you to trust me one more time. Go to the Hastings Technologies headquarters this morning at 9 a.m. Come to the executive floor. I'm about to do something I should have done 23 years ago. I love you. I've always loved you. and today I'm getting justice for your father. Second to Derek Patel, it's time, are you ready? I've been ready for 2 years, Derek said. Let's take this bastard down. Third to Amanda Sterling, the Seattle Times tech reporter who'd been investigating tech industry fraud for years. Ms. Sterling, this is Dr. Evelyn Morrison. I believe I have the story you've been waiting for. Can you be at Hastings Technologies at 9 a.m.? Bring your cameras. You'll want to record this. She gathered her folder of evidence, thick now, filled with documents, photographs, recordings, and testimony, and left her apartment. The morning was clear and bright, and for the first time in 23 years, Evelyn felt something she'd thought she'd lost forever. Hope. Not hope that everything would be okay or that justice would erase the pain, but hope that the truth, finally, would be heard, that James's name would be restored, that the man who'd stolen everything would finally face consequences. As she rode the bus downtown toward the gleaming tower of Hastings Technologies, Evelyn Morrison allowed herself a small smile. The invisible woman was about to become impossible to ignore. The executive floor of Hastings Technologies at 8:45 a.m. was already bustling with controlled chaos. Board members arrived in expensive suits, assistants rushed with last-minute documents, and IT staff tested the presentation equipment in the main conference room. No one noticed the woman in the gray suit who stepped off the elevator, carrying a leather portfolio and walking with the quiet confidence of someone who belonged. Evelyn Morrison had timed everything precisely, early enough that Marcus Hastings wouldn't yet be in the conference room to intercept her, but late enough that board members and key players would be gathering. She'd studied the board composition for months. 8 members, including Marcus as CEO, 3 venture capital representatives, 2 tech industry veterans, the CFO, and 1 independent director who'd recently joined amid shareholder pressure for better oversight. The conference room was a monument to corporate excess, a massive table of polished mahogany, leather chairs that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and a wall of windows offering a breathtaking view of Elliott Bay. A breakfast spread was laid out on the sidebar, artisanal pastries, exotic fruits, coffee that probably cost $40 a pound. "Excuse me, can I help you?" A young assistant, probably an executive coordinator, approached Evelyn with polite concern. "This is a closed board meeting." "My name is Dr. Evelyn Morrison," Evelyn said clearly. "I'm here to present evidence to the board regarding the foundational patents of this company." The assistant blinked, confused. I don't have you on the list. Are you with a law firm?" "No, I'm the widow of Dr. James Morrison, the actual inventor of the technology that launched Hastings Technologies, and I have evidence that your CEO committed patent fraud 23 years ago." The assistant's eyes widened. I should call Mr. Hastings." "Please do," Evelyn said calmly. "I'd like him to be present for this." As the assistant scurried away, several board members who'd overheard the exchange stopped their conversations. Evelyn recognized Robert Chandler, the lead venture capital representative, a man in his 60s with sharp eyes and sharper instincts. "Did you just accuse Marcus Hastings of patent fraud?" Chandler asked, his tone more curious than defensive. "I did," Evelyn said, "and I can prove it." Before Chandler could respond, Marcus Hastings burst into the conference room, his face flushed with anger. He'd clearly been in his office preparing for the meeting and had been summoned by the frantic assistant. "What the hell are you doing here?" Marcus demanded. "Security." "Before you have me removed," Evelyn said, raising her voice to carry across the room, "you might want to consider whether you want this conversation to happen in front of your board or in front of the reporters I've invited. They're in the lobby. I can call them up if you'd prefer a public venue." Marcus froze. The other board members had stopped what they were doing, attention fully focused on the confrontation unfolding. "Everyone please sit down," said Victoria Lawrence, the independent director and former federal prosecutor who joined the board 6 months ago specifically to improve corporate governance. She'd been appointed after shareholders raised concerns about Hastings' autocratic management style. "Let's hear what Dr. Morrison has to say. If her claims are baseless, we can dismiss them quickly, but if they have merit, we need to address them." "Victoria, this woman is delusional," Marcus said tightly. "She's been making wild accusations for years. She was a cleaning lady here, for God's sake, until I fired her last night." "You hired a woman as a cleaning lady who claims you committed patent fraud against her dead husband." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "That seems unwise." "I didn't know who she was. She was just—" Marcus caught himself, but the damage was done. "Just a cleaning lady," Evelyn finished softly. "Invisible, beneath your notice. Yes, Mr. Hastings, that's exactly what I was counting on." Victoria gestured to a chair. "Dr. Morrison, please sit. Everyone else, take your seats. Mr. Hastings, you too." For a moment, Marcus looked like he might refuse, might call security anyway and have Evelyn forcibly removed. But Robert Chandler was already sitting down, and the other board members were following suit. Marcus had no choice but to comply or reveal his desperation. He sat, but his eyes burned with fury as he stared at Evelyn. "You have 15 minutes, Victoria said to Evelyn. "Make your case." Evelyn opened her portfolio. Her hands were steady. She'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in her mind. "April 19, 2002, she began. "Marcus Hastings filed a patent for a revolutionary quantum computing stabilization method. This patent became the foundation of Hastings Technologies and has generated billions of dollars in revenue. The patent lists Marcus Hastings as the sole inventor." She pulled out a document and slid it across the table. "This is that patent." She then placed another document beside it. "This is the research journal of my late husband, Dr. James Morrison, dated from January 2001 through April 16, 2002, 2 days before his death. As you can see, the quantum bit stabilization methodology is described in detail, including the exact dual-phase approach that appears in Mr. Hastings' patent. The journal was authenticated by a forensic document examiner whose report is included in your folders." Several board members picked up the documents, comparing them. Evelyn could see the realization dawning on their faces. "That doesn't prove anything," Marcus said. "James and I collaborated on research. We discussed many ideas. Just because he wrote something in a journal doesn't mean he invented it or that I didn't arrive at the same conclusion independently." "A reasonable point," Evelyn acknowledged, "which is why I have additional evidence." She pulled out a USB drive. "May I use the presentation screen?" Victoria nodded to the IT technician who'd been setting up for the board meeting. Moments later, the large screen at the head of the conference room flickered to life. "This is a recording from April 15, 2002, Evelyn said. "My husband and I often recorded our research discussions for documentation purposes. On this date, James called me while I was at a conference in San Francisco to tell me about his breakthrough." She pressed play. James Morrison's voice filled the conference room, warm and excited and alive. "Evie, I did it. I actually did it. The dual-phase stabilization method. I solved it." The board listened to the entire 2-minute recording, hearing James describe his achievement in his own words, explaining the methodology in detail. Several board members glanced at Marcus, whose jaw was clenched so tight Evelyn could see the muscle jumping. "James mentions that he'd called Marcus to share the news," Evelyn said. "That was 8:47 p.m. on April 15, 2002. Phone records confirm the call. Less than 48 hours later, on April 17, James was dead, and 48 hours after that, Marcus filed the patent." "Tragic timing," Marcus said, his voice strained. "But James's death was an accident. The police investigated and found no foul play." "Indeed," Evelyn said. "An accident. James supposedly drank too much whiskey, lost his footing on the cabin stairs, and fell to his death. You were the only witness." "I tried to save him," Marcus said. "I called 911 immediately." "So you claim." Evelyn pulled out another document. "But here's what's interesting. The medical examiner's report notes bruising on James's upper arms consistent with being grabbed or restrained. The report also notes that while James's blood alcohol was elevated, it was only 0.09, barely over the legal limit for driving, certainly not drunk enough to lose all coordination. My husband was 62 and 195 pounds. He was healthy and athletic. The idea that he simply stumbled downstairs doesn't quite add up." "Are you accusing me of murder?" Marcus's voice rose. "Because that's insane. The police investigated. The medical examiner ruled it an accident." I'm nodding inconsistencies, Evelyn said calmly. But you're right, I can't prove murder and I'm not here to litigate that. I'm here to prove patent theft. So let's continue. She clicked to the next slide, an email. This is an email from you to a patent attorney named Richard Good, dated April 18, 2002, the day after James died, one day before you filed the patent. In it you write, need to rush through quantum computing patent ASAP, have complete specifications ready. Client confidentiality essential. Marcus shifted in his chair. That's attorney-client privileged. Not anymore, Evelyn said. Mr. Good's firm dissolved in 2015, and their digital archives were improperly secured. A security researcher discovered the breach last year, and these emails were part of the recovered data. Once data is in the public domain through a breach, privilege is complicated. But that's a question for lawyers. What matters is the timeline. You contacted a patent attorney the day after my husband died, and before his funeral, rushing to file a patent for technology he described to you 3 days earlier. She advanced to the next slide, photographs from James's funeral. This is you, Mr. Hastings, at my husband's funeral on April 20, 2002, offering me condolences. And this, she clicked forward, is the patent filing confirmation, dated April 19, 2002. You were preparing to steal my husband's legacy even as you pretended to mourn him. The room was utterly silent. Several board members looked horrified. Robert Chandler's expression had gone from curious to grim. But wait, Evelyn said, there's more. She clicked to a new document. These are emails retrieved from Hastings Technologies' backup servers, servers that apparently archive everything and that your IT staff forgot existed in a legacy storage facility. Over the past 6 months, I've had access to them. Marcus's face went pale. In these emails, Evelyn continued, we have multiple conversations where you, Mr. Hastings, privately acknowledge the source of your technology. For example, this email from 2008 to your then CFO. The quantum tech came from Morrison's research. Guy's dead, not like he's going to complain. Built the whole company on his genius and no one knows but me. That's out of context, Marcus shouted. That was a joke, dark humor. Really? Evelyn pulled up another email. How about this one from 2013 to your VP of R&D? Sometimes I almost feel guilty about the Morrison thing. But then I remember, if he'd been smart enough to patent it before telling me, he'd be the billionaire instead. Not my fault he was naive. The board members were exchanging glances now, some whispering to each other. Victoria Lawrence leaned forward, her prosecutor instincts fully engaged. Mr. Hastings, Victoria said coldly, I strongly suggest you consult with legal counsel before saying anything further. But Marcus was unraveling, the careful facade cracking under pressure. You don't understand. James was going to waste that technology in academia. He was going to publish it in journals where anyone could use it. I saw its commercial potential. I built a company that employed thousands of people. I made quantum computing practical and accessible. Yes, I used his research, but I did something with it that he never would have. So you admit it, Evelyn said quietly. Marcus seemed to realize what he just said. He slumped back in his chair, the fight draining from him. Jesus Christ, Robert Chandler muttered, running a hand through his hair. Evelyn wasn't finished. I also have testimony from 3 former employees willing to go on record about how Mr. Hastings has a pattern of taking credit for others' innovations. I have documentation of harassment complaints that were buried. I have evidence of questionable accounting practices. And most importantly, I have the sworn statement of a patent attorney, not Mr. Good, but another attorney James consulted, who confirms that James Morrison was planning to file this exact patent on April 22, 2002, and that Mr. Hastings would have known this. She closed her portfolio. Gentlemen, members of the board, you have a choice. You can acknowledge what happened, take corrective action, and try to salvage this company's reputation. Or you can circle the wagons around Mr. Hastings, and I will take all of this to the press, to law enforcement, and to civil court. Either way, the truth is coming out. But if you act now, you might be able to control the narrative and save the company. Victoria Lawrence stood up. We need to adjourn to executive session. Mr. Hastings, I'm recommending you recuse yourself and that you engage legal counsel immediately. Dr. Morrison, please wait in the lobby. We'll need to speak with you further. There are reporters downstairs, Evelyn said. I told them I'd call them up after the meeting. What should I tell them? Give us 1 hour, Victoria said. We need to consult with our attorneys and determine the appropriate course of action. As Evelyn gathered her materials, Marcus Hastings looked at her with something that might have been respect mixed with hatred. You planned this for months, he said. The cleaning job, the evidence gathering, all of it. 23 years, Evelyn corrected. I've been planning this for 23 years. You just didn't notice until it was too late. She walked out of the conference room, her heart pounding but her steps steady. In the lobby, she saw Amanda Sterling from the Seattle Times, cameras ready, along with several other reporters who'd gotten wind of something big breaking at Hastings Technologies. And sitting in one of the lobby chairs, having clearly just arrived, was a young woman in a business suit with James Morrison's eyes and Evelyn's determined chin. Sarah, Evelyn breathed. Her daughter stood up, eyes wet with tears. I got your message. I came as fast as I could. Mom, is it true? Do you really have proof about Dad? Evelyn nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Then let's finish this, Sarah said, taking her mother's hand. Together. For the first time in 23 years, Evelyn Morrison allowed herself to cry. Not tears of grief, but tears of relief. She wasn't invisible anymore. She wasn't alone. And justice, finally, was within reach. The ghost had become a force, and Marcus Hastings' empire was crumbling. The conference room had transformed from a routine board meeting into a war room. Victoria Lawrence had called in the company's outside legal counsel, and for the past 45 minutes, attorneys had been reviewing Evelyn's evidence with growing alarm. Marcus Hastings sat in a corner, his personal lawyer whispering urgently in his ear, his face a mask of barely controlled panic. Evelyn and Sarah waited in an adjacent office, holding hands in silence. Through the glass walls, they could see the controlled chaos, the urgent phone calls, the grim faces of board members realizing they were sitting on a corporate scandal that could destroy the company. I can't believe you did all this, Sarah said quietly. For 6 months you were right there and he never knew. Being invisible has its advantages, Evelyn said. People reveal their true selves when they think no one important is watching. All these years I thought, Sarah's voice cracked, I thought you'd just given up on Dad's memory, that you'd chosen your own pain over fighting for him. I was so angry with you. I know, and you had every right to be. I did give up for a while. I was lost in grief and couldn't be the mother you needed, but I never forgot what was taken from us, from your father. The door opened, and Victoria Lawrence entered, followed by Robert Chandler and the company's lead attorney, a silver-haired woman named Margaret Chen. Dr. Morrison, Victoria began, we've reviewed your evidence. We've also had preliminary discussions with our legal team about the company's exposure and potential liability. And, Evelyn kept her voice steady, though her heart was racing. You've built an extraordinarily comprehensive case, Margaret said. The emails alone would be damaging, but combined with the authenticated research journal, the phone records, the witness testimony, and Mr. Hastings' own admissions from this morning, which several board members have already documented, you have overwhelming evidence of patent fraud. What happens now? Sarah asked, her voice sharp with the lawyer instinct she was still developing in law school. Victoria exchanged glances with the others. The board is prepared to offer a settlement, a significant one. In exchange, we'd ask that you sign a non-disclosure agreement and allow us to manage the public narrative around this situation. Absolutely not, Evelyn said immediately. Dr. Morrison, please understand. No, you understand, Evelyn interrupted, standing up. For 23 years, Marcus Hastings has been celebrated as a visionary inventor. He's given TED Talks. He's been on magazine covers. He's been held up as an example of American innovation. All of it built on my husband's stolen work. You want me to take money and stay silent so you can protect the company's reputation. We want to protect thousands of jobs, Robert Chandler said quietly. If this becomes a massive public scandal, investor confidence will evaporate. Stock prices will crater. We could lose contracts worth billions. People's retirement savings, their livelihoods, all of it is tied to this company. That's not Dr. Morrison's problem, Sarah said fiercely. Your CEO committed fraud. The consequences are his responsibility, not hers. Sarah's right, Evelyn said, but I'm not unreasonable. I don't want to destroy the company or hurt innocent employees. What I want is justice, real justice, public justice. What does that look like to you? Victoria asked. Evelyn had thought about this moment for years. First, Marcus Hastings resigns immediately and publicly acknowledges that the foundational patent of this company was based on Dr. James Morrison's research. Second, the patent is refiled to list James Morrison as the primary inventor, with a posthumous recognition. Third, the company establishes a foundation in James's name, funded with, she paused, doing mental calculations, 10% of the company's annual profits in perpetuity, dedicated to supporting quantum computing research by underrepresented researchers. 10%, Chandler looked stunned. That's hundreds of millions of dollars. That's what James's invention has been worth to this company. He should benefit from it, even if he can't be here. And Sarah and I should benefit as his heirs. You're asking for equity, Margaret asked. I'm asking for what should have been ours from the beginning. The patent was James's intellectual property. If he'd filed it himself and then licensed it to a company, he would have negotiated an equity stake and royalties. I want a retroactive royalty agreement as if that had been the arrangement from day one, calculated from 2002 to present, plus equity representing the value of the foundational patent. Margaret was already calculating on her laptop. Her face went pale. That would be, Dr. Morrison, based on the company's valuation and profit history, you'd be talking about potentially billions of dollars in retroactive royalties and a majority equity stake. Then I suppose James's invention was very valuable, Evelyn said calmly. Certainly Marcus Hastings thought so, or he wouldn't have stolen it. The room fell silent. Victoria and Robert exchanged loaded glances. There's another option, Victoria finally said. What if we remove Marcus immediately, restructure the board and bring you in as a major shareholder with a seat on the board? We negotiate a fair valuation for the patent's historical contribution, but structure it in a way that doesn't bankrupt the company or destroy shareholder value. You get justice, recognition for your husband, and the ability to shape the company's future. We get to survive as a company and make this right. And Marcus Hastings faces consequences, Victoria said firmly. Civil suit for the patent fraud, which he'll lose given the evidence. Whether criminal charges are pursued for the suspicious circumstances of your husband's death would be up to law enforcement, but we'd fully cooperate with any investigation. Evelyn looked at Sarah, who squeezed her hand. What do you think? Evelyn asked her daughter. I think Dad would want his legacy to mean something positive, Sarah said. He'd want his work to help other researchers, to advance the field he loved. But he'd also want the man who betrayed him to face real consequences, not just write a check and walk away. Evelyn turned back to Victoria. I want Marcus Hastings prosecuted for fraud. I want the suspicious circumstances of James's death reinvestigated. I want a public acknowledgement of what he did, not some vague corporate statement. And I want meaningful control over this company to ensure it actually honors James's legacy. We can make that happen, Victoria said. But we need your cooperation to do it in a way that's strategic. If you go to the press right now with everything, it becomes chaos. Markets panic, lawyers swarm, nothing gets resolved cleanly. But if we work together, board, shareholders, and you, we can force Hastings out, restructure transparently, and create a narrative of accountability and justice that might actually preserve the company. Why should I trust you? Evelyn asked. You've been on the board while Marcus ran roughshod over ethics. Because I was brought on 6 months ago specifically to clean house, Victoria said. Shareholders have been concerned about Hastings' management for years. I'm a former prosecutor. My job is to root out corruption. I didn't know about the patent fraud, but now that I do, I'm not going to protect him. Evelyn studied the older woman's face, looking for deception and finding only steely determination. 72 hours, Evelyn said finally. You have 72 hours to remove Marcus, announce a full investigation, acknowledge James's contribution, and present me with a detailed proposal for how you'll make this right. If I'm not satisfied, I go to the press with everything." "Agreed," Victoria said immediately, before the lawyers could object. "But you need to keep the reporters at bay for those 72 hours." "I can do that," Evelyn said. "But I'm not signing anything that limits my ability to speak the truth if you don't follow through." "Fair enough." They shook hands, and Evelyn felt the surreal nature of the moment. She'd walked into this building as a cleaning lady with a cart. She was leaving as a woman who just brought down a billionaire and claimed an empire. The next 72 hours were a whirlwind. True to Victoria's word, Marcus Hastings was forced to resign at an emergency board meeting that evening. His resignation letter, carefully crafted by lawyers but still damning, acknowledged serious questions about the origins of certain patents and the need for the company to thoroughly investigate its foundational intellectual property. The Seattle Times ran the story the next morning. Tech CEO resigns amid patent fraud allegations. Amanda Sterling's article was careful but pointed, noting that sources close to the situation indicate the patents in question may have been improperly appropriated from deceased researcher Dr. James Morrison. The tech world exploded. Within hours, it was the top story on every industry site. Former employees came forward with their own stories of Hastings' ethical lapses. Shareholders filed lawsuits. The SEC announced a preliminary inquiry. But in the midst of the chaos, the board acted decisively. They appointed Victoria Lawrence as interim CEO. They announced a complete forensic audit of the company's patent portfolio. They established the Dr. James Morrison Quantum Research Foundation with an initial funding of $500 million. And they held a press conference where Victoria Lawrence stood at a podium with two large photographs behind her, one of Marcus Hastings and one of Dr. James Morrison smiling in his lab. "This company was built on the brilliance of Dr. James Morrison," Victoria said to the assembled reporters and cameras. "For too long, his contribution was not acknowledged. Today, we begin to make that right." Standing in the audience, Evelyn held Sarah's hand and felt tears streaming down her face as Victoria detailed the company's plans. The foundation, the refiling of patents with proper attribution, the full investigation, and the appointment of Dr. Evelyn Morrison to the board of directors with a significant equity stake. "We cannot undo the injustice of the past 23 years, Victoria said. "But we can honor Dr. Morrison's legacy, support his family, and ensure that Hastings Technologies becomes a company that truly values innovation and integrity." The applause was genuine, if somewhat bewildered. This was unprecedented, a tech company voluntarily exposing its own scandal and trying to make amends. After the press conference, reporters swarmed Evelyn. "Dr. Morrison, how does it feel to finally get justice? Do you think Marcus Hastings will face criminal charges? What will you do with your equity stake?" Evelyn, with Sarah beside her, answered each question carefully, graciously, her voice steady despite the emotional earthquake she was experiencing. "Justice isn't just about punishing wrongdoing," she told one reporter. "It's about restoration. My husband's name will finally be attached to his work. His legacy will support other researchers. That's what James would have wanted." "And Marcus Hastings," another reporter pressed. "Mr. Hastings will face the consequences of his actions, as determined by the legal system. But my focus isn't on revenge. It's on honoring my husband's memory and ensuring his work helps advance the field he loved." 6 weeks later, Evelyn stood in her new office on the executive floor of Hastings Technologies, the same floor she'd once cleaned. The space had been completely redesigned, with photos of James's research, awards from his academic career, and his original research journals displayed in cases. Sarah visited after her classes, marveling at the transformation. "It's surreal," Sarah said. 6 months ago, you were pushing a mop. Now you're a board member and one of the largest shareholders in a billion-dollar company." "It's not about the money or the power," Evelyn said. "It's about your father's work finally being recognized." "It's about more than that, Mom," Sarah said softly. "It's about you fighting for what was right, even when everyone said you were crazy. You never gave up on Dad." On Evelyn's desk was a framed photograph. James, Evelyn, and little Sarah at the beach, all laughing. It was a memory from before the nightmare, but also a promise of what they'd been fighting for all along. The door opened, and Derek Patel, the engineer who'd helped Evelyn gather evidence, poked his head in. "Dr. Morrison, the Foundation Board is ready for you. We have 20 applications for the first round of research grants to review." "I'll be right there," Evelyn said. The Dr. James Morrison Quantum Research Foundation had already become one of the most prestigious grant programs in the field, specifically targeting researchers from underrepresented backgrounds. The first major grant was going to a brilliant young woman from Nigeria working on quantum encryption, exactly the kind of researcher James would have championed. As for Marcus Hastings, he was facing multiple civil suits and a criminal investigation into financial fraud. The investigation into James's death had been officially reopened, with forensic experts re-examining the evidence with fresh eyes. Even if he avoided criminal conviction, his reputation was destroyed. His fortune was rapidly depleting through legal fees and settlements, and his name would forever be associated with theft and betrayal. Evelyn didn't take joy in his downfall, but she took satisfaction in knowing that the truth had prevailed. That evening, Evelyn and Sarah had dinner at a small restaurant overlooking the water, a ritual they'd established in recent weeks as they rebuilt their relationship. "I'm sorry I doubted you for so long," Sarah said over dessert. "All those years I thought you'd just given up." "I gave up for a while," Evelyn admitted. "I was lost, but even in my darkest moments I never forgot what was taken from us, and when I was ready to fight again, I did it smarter. I became invisible so I could see everything." "You know what the crazy thing is," Sarah said. "If Marcus Hastings had just shown you basic human respect, if he'd treated you like a person instead of furniture, you might never have had the access to gather all that evidence." Evelyn smiled. His arrogance was his downfall. He thought being a billionaire made him untouchable. He thought the cleaning lady was beneath his notice. But the truth is, there's no such thing as an unimportant person. Everyone deserves dignity. Everyone deserves to be seen. "Dad knew that," Sarah said. "Yes, your father saw everyone. He treated everyone with respect, from Nobel laureates to undergraduates to the custodian in his building. That's who he was. And that's why his legacy should be more than just a patent. It should be about uplifting others, about treating people with dignity." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over Puget Sound, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. "Do you think Dad would be proud?" Sarah asked. Evelyn thought about James, his kindness, his integrity, his belief in the goodness of people even when that belief was betrayed. "I think," Evelyn said carefully, "your father would be proud that we didn't let hatred consume us, that we fought for justice without becoming bitter, that we're using his legacy to help others. Yes, sweetheart, I think he'd be very proud." As they left the restaurant, Evelyn looked back at the Seattle skyline, at the Hastings Technologies building, soon to be renamed Morrison Hastings Technologies, with James's name rightfully restored to prominence. She'd been invisible for so long. As a widow, as a woman who'd lost everything, as a cleaning lady moving through the halls of power unnoticed. But invisibility had given her power, the power to observe, to gather truth, to strike at the perfect moment. Marcus Hastings had laughed at her, dismissed her, told her she knew nothing. But she'd known everything, and now the whole world knew too. Justice had been a long time coming, but it had arrived at last, carried by a woman who'd been invisible but never powerless, defeated but never broken, silent but never truly gone. The ghost had spoken, and in speaking she'd restored a legacy, reclaimed a truth, and reminded the powerful that no one, absolutely no one, is too small to matter, too broken to fight back, or too invisible to change everything. The auditorium at MIT was packed for the inaugural Dr. James Morrison Memorial Lecture. Evelyn stood backstage, adjusting her formal dress, while Sarah, now working as an associate at a major intellectual property law firm, gave her mother's hand a reassuring squeeze. "You ready, Mom?" "I think so," Evelyn said. "Strange, isn't it? A year ago I was cleaning offices. Now I'm giving a keynote lecture at MIT. "You've always been Dr. Evelyn Morrison," Sarah said. "You just got lost for a while, but you found your way back." The introduction was being given by Dr. Angela Chen, chair of MIT's Quantum Computing Department, and someone who'd known James years ago. Dr. James Morrison was a visionary whose work changed the course of computing history, Dr. Chen said to the audience. For too long, his contributions were hidden, stolen by someone he trusted. But today, thanks to the courage and persistence of his wife, Dr. Evelyn Morrison, James's legacy has been restored. And more than that, it's been transformed into a force for good through the foundation that bears his name. The audience applauded, and Evelyn walked onto the stage, feeling James's presence like a warm hand on her shoulder. She spoke for 45 minutes about quantum computing, about James's research, about the importance of integrity in science and business. But she also spoke about invisibility and power, about how the most dangerous people to the corrupt are often those they fail to see. For 23 years I was invisible, she told the audience. First as a widow overwhelmed by grief, then as a woman dismissed by a system that valued power over truth, and finally, literally invisible, a cleaning lady moving through spaces of power, unseen and disregarded. She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. But here's what I learned. Being invisible doesn't mean being powerless. Sometimes, being underestimated is the greatest advantage you can have. The people who dismiss you, who look through you, who treat you as if you don't matter, they're the ones who will never see you coming. The audience leaned forward, captivated. My husband James believed in the dignity of every person. He believed that everyone has value, everyone deserves respect, everyone should be seen. The man who betrayed him didn't understand that. He thought being powerful meant he could ignore the people he considered beneath him, and that arrogance was ultimately his downfall. She clicked to a slide showing the Foundation's first year of accomplishments. 50 research grants awarded, 3 breakthrough discoveries funded, dozens of young researchers from underrepresented backgrounds supported. This is James's real legacy, Evelyn said. Not the patents or the technology, but the lives changed, the barriers broken, the knowledge advanced. He believed science should serve humanity. Now, through this foundation, his work continues to do exactly that. As she finished her talk to thunderous applause, Evelyn felt something she hadn't felt in decades. Complete peace. Not because the pain of losing James was gone, that would never fully heal, but because she'd honored him in the best way possible. The reception afterward was crowded with researchers, students, and journalists. Several young women of color approached Evelyn to thank her for the Foundation's work. I got my first major research grant from the Morrison Foundation, one young researcher said, tears in her eyes. I'm from a small town in Mississippi, first in my family to get a PhD. Without this funding, I would have had to give up my research. Dr. Morrison's legacy literally changed my life. These moments, Evelyn thought, were worth everything. As the evening wound down, she stood alone for a moment in the hallway, looking at a photograph of James that was part of a memorial display. "We did it, love," she whispered. "Your work is finally recognized, your name is restored, and your legacy is helping the next generation of researchers, just like you always wanted." She felt Sarah's arm around her shoulders. "Ready to go home, Mom?" "Yes," Evelyn said, "I'm ready." As they walked out into the crisp evening air, Evelyn Morrison, widow, survivor, board member, advocate, knew that her journey from invisibility to vindication had been about more than revenge or justice. It had been about proving that every person matters, that truth has power, and that sometimes the people others fail to see are the ones who change everything. Marcus Hastings had laughed at the cleaning lady, certain she knew nothing. But she had known everything. And in the end, that knowledge had rewritten history, restored a legacy, and reminded the world that the most powerful force in the universe isn't money or position. It's truth carried by someone brave enough to speak it, patient enough to prove it, and strong enough to never give up. The invisible woman had become unforgettable. And Dr. James Morrison's legacy would shine on forever. What would you have done in Evelyn's shoes? Think about it. 23 years. 23 years of pain, of loss, of watching the man who destroyed your family get richer and more celebrated while you lost everything. Most people would have given up. Most people would have let the bitterness consume them or would have just faded away into obscurity. But Evelyn Morrison didn't give up. She became invisible so she could see everything. She turned her pain into purpose. She waited for the perfect moment. And when that moment came, she struck with precision, armed with truth and evidence that couldn't be denied. This story should make your blood boil and restore your faith in justice all at once. Because this is what happens when arrogance meets accountability, when power meets persistence, when someone who's been silenced finally finds their voice and uses it to dismantle an empire built on lies. How many Marcus Hastings types are out there right now? How many people in positions of power who treat others as invisible, who steal credit, who believe their money and status make them untouchable? And how many Evelyns are out there, gathering their evidence, waiting for their moment, ready to expose the truth? If this story moved you, if you felt the rage when Marcus dismissed Evelyn, if you felt the satisfaction when she revealed who she really was, if you felt the triumph when justice finally prevailed, I need you to do something right now. Smash that like button if you believe that no one is too powerful to face consequences for their actions. Drop a comment below saying, Justice SCRVAD, if you think Evelyn Morrison is an absolute legend for what she did. Tell me, what moment hit you the hardest? Was it when she revealed her identity, when the board turned against Marcus, when Sarah showed up to support her mother? I want to hear what this story meant to you. And here's the thing, this kind of story, these tales of regular people standing up to corrupt power, of underdogs who refuse to stay down, of truth that refuses to stay buried, these stories matter. They remind us that we're not powerless, that justice isn't just for the wealthy and connected, that sometimes the person you overlook is the one who will change everything. Subscribe and hit that notification bell because I'm bringing you more stories like this. Stories of people who were underestimated but came back stronger. Stories of secrets that got exposed. Stories of justice that seemed impossible but happened anyway. Stories that will make you angry, make you cry, and make you believe that good can win. The powerful count on us staying silent. They count on us being distracted. They count on us feeling like we don't matter. But we do matter. Our voices matter. Our actions matter. And when we stand together and demand justice, we can move mountains. So hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join this community fighting for truth and justice. Because the next story I share might be even more unbelievable than this one, and you don't want to miss it. Remember, you might be invisible to some people, but that doesn't mean you're powerless. Sometimes being underestimated is the greatest weapon you can have. Comment, I see you, if you're ready to stand with everyone who's been dismissed, overlooked, or treated as if they don't matter. Let's flood the comments and show that we're a community that sees each other, that values each other, and that will fight for each other. Let's make this video go viral. Let's make sure Evelyn Morrison's story and stories like hers reach millions of people. Because the world needs to know, the invisible ones are watching, the dismissed ones are gathering truth, and when the moment comes, justice will prevail. Drop your comments below. I'm reading every single one, and I'll see you in the next video with another story that'll remind you why truth, persistence, and courage will always win in the end. Justice SCRVED. Now let's serve it to millions more. Hit that subscribe button now.